Good evening and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar today. And while we're waiting for everyone to join, we would like to ask you to write in chat where you are joining us from. We'd be very interested in hearing where you're joining us from. And we also have a poll question that we would like to ask. This poll question is asking about your particular interests in this webinar. Are you interested in the blue zones in Okinawa and the rest of the world, comparing and contrasting aging in Japan and the United States, how people can live more productive and healthy lives, the scientific process of aging, and the social and government policies to support seniors? We would love to hear from you. And we have people joining us from Dallas, from Okinawa, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Canada, Oregon, Delaware, more in Okinawa, North Carolina, East Texas, and Chicago, and more. I'm going to end the poll now and quickly share the results with everyone. Winning out the poll is how people can live more productive and healthy lives. That seems to be the most interested area. And then the blue zones in Okinawa and the rest of the world was next. And then third, the scientific process of aging. So thank you so much for your time. Once again, very good evening or good morning if you're in Japan or Asia joining us. I am David Janes of the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University and the OIST Foundation. And I'd like to thank everyone for joining us again for this webinar, which is titled Living Longer and Healthier, Blue Zones and Aging in the US and Japan. The OIST Foundation is pleased to be holding this event in partnership with the Japan America Society of Dallas-Fort Worth. And we are also so appreciative of the 4 amazing panelists joining us, whom you will soon hear from. For those who do not know, OIST is the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University, and it's an interdisciplinary graduate school offering a 5-year PhD program in science. Located in Okinawa, one of the blue zones, OIST is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. And in our short lifespan so far, we have achieved global recognition. In 2019, Nature magazine ranked OIST 9th globally and 1st in Japan for research quality on a normalized basis. The main task of OIST is to produce groundbreaking, cutting-edge research for the benefit of all humankind. The OIST Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is based in New York, and it supports scientific breakthroughs, innovation, and the sustainable development of Okinawa through OIST. And if I didn't say it before, my name is David Janes, and I oversee the foundation and work directly for OIST in the President's office. Tonight's webinar is on the record and is being recorded, and each panelist will present for approximately 10 minutes, and then we will engage in a discussion and have time for Q&A. We welcome your engagement. Please feel free to write in the chat or using the Q&A feature anytime to ask your questions. We'll collect those and we will ask those during the Q&A session. It's now my pleasure to introduce to you Paul Pass, who is the Executive Director of the Japan America Society of Dallas-Fort Worth. Paul, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, David. And for those who have not met me before, I know we have several people from the Dallas-Fort Worth area. My name is Paul Pass, and I am the Executive Director of the Japan America Society of Dallas-Fort Worth. So hello and welcome to everyone. Good evening to our guests from the US, and Ohayo gozaimasu to those joining from Japan. The Japan America Society of Dallas-Fort Worth is a nonprofit organization founded in 1970 to create connections between Japanese and Americans in North Texas through our business networking and policy discussions, social and cultural events, educational activities and community outreach, and international exchange with Sendai, Japan. The program tonight on aging and healthier living is one of many we have presented since the COVID pandemic began about, I guess, a little over a year ago now. We are grateful for the opportunity to convene virtually today across multiple time zones and international borders. And although the logistics of this event would be much more challenging to arrange in person, we also look forward to a time soon when we can gather for panel conversations, festivals, and community celebrations. Before I introduce our first speaker, I wanted to share that this program is of special meaning for us in North Texas because the city of Fort Worth is a certified member of the Blue Zones community, and I will share a link to more information in the chat box later. We have 4 total speakers for today's program, and presenting first is Lauren Dunning, who is a director at the Milken Institute Center for the Future of Aging in Santa Monica, California. Lauren, please feel free to begin.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I am excited to be sharing a bit more. So let me get my slides up and running, and then we can begin. So hi, everyone. I'm here to talk about the theme that we're focused on, which is blue zones and aging in the US and Japan. Thank you for the great introduction. I am with the Center for the Future of Aging at the Milken Institute. And at the center, we elevate awareness, advance solutions, and catalyze action to promote healthy longevity and financial wellness. Through research, convening, advocacy, and partnership with leaders across sectors, the center works to improve lives and build a better future for all ages. Worldwide, more than 1 billion people age 60 plus are living today, but by 2050, there's gonna be more than 2 billion. And first, it's critical that we discuss the future of aging as a great demographic shift that's currently underway. Then with this, I'm sure we will cover many of the challenges that this presents, especially given everything that's gone on with the COVID-19 pandemic and with Japan having the world's current longest average life expectancy. So there are challenges with this shift, but also opportunities. First, health challenges. So we know that there are certain health challenges in an aging society. For example, chronic disease accounts for more than half of mortality in the US right now. And in Japan, 2 specific chronic diseases, cancer and heart disease, which also happen to be the leading causes of death in the United States.
Right, Lauren?
Yes.
You're having a great presentation. We can't see your slides, though. I know the audience would like to see those.
Uh-oh, yeah. Thank you very much for stopping me. That's, I apologize for the technical challenge there. Sharing now. Hopefully that helps the situation. Thank you very much. Apologies. So, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so back to where we are, which is the health challenges of an aging society. So one important thing to think about is the financial impact of chronic disease and dementia. We know that the cumulative cost of chronic disease treatment in the US right now is more than 1 trillion annually. This is set to escalate over the coming years. Additionally, there's specific challenges associated with social isolation and loneliness, which are more pertinent than ever with the COVID-19 pandemic. In the United States, nearly 1/4 of US adults older than 65 are considered socially isolated. And in Japan, this is also an issue, and we see that 15% of men age 75 plus living alone average less than 1 conversation every 2 weeks. Social isolation has important health consequences. It increases the risk of premature death and is associated with 50% increased risk in dementia, and as well as risk for other health conditions. But let's get to solutions. So given these sobering statistics, what can we look to? And at the top of the hour, we talked about blue zones, and that's our focus here today. Both purpose and social connection are incorporated into blue zones as important factors in healthy longevity. And I'm going to talk a bit more about how and why they're important and how we can increase both purpose and connection. So first, how does purpose make us healthy? Purpose itself is health protective. Individuals with high levels of purpose are less likely to have Alzheimer's disease. They also have reduced risk for heart disease and stroke. And many people gain purpose in their life from family, but also from work and from volunteering and many other outlets. But taking a look at a few, volunteering as an older adult can improve cognitive function, delay physical disability, reduce hypertension, and lower risks of mortality. Specific volunteering programs have shown better self-reported health. And in addition, studies have shown that working past traditional retirement age in some cases can have positive impacts on overall health and mortality risk. So knowing that purpose itself can improve our health, we also want to take a look at social connection. 77% of adults wish there were more opportunities for intergenerational interaction in their community. Connection is an important part of Blue Zones, and it can help protect against social isolation and loneliness. We know there are health and social benefits also to intergenerational connection. And larger and more diverse social networks are associated with lower mortality risk and larger social networks. So just a quick factoid, the Baltimore Experience Corps, an intergenerational tutoring program, was shown to increase brain volume in areas involved in memory, and there's benefits all around. The children involved receive critical support for their academic success. There are benefits to multi-generational workforces as well, and there's important ties to happiness from the generativity involved in investing in future generations. So having a little bit of background on why social connection and why social isolation are so important to healthy longevity, and some about how we can get them, where do we go from here? What's the path ahead? So thinking about this, we partnered with our Center for the Future of Aging advisory board, and they shared their perspectives with us on COVID-19 and the future of aging, really focusing and thinking about what are the long-term challenges and what are the opportunities for us to emerge better from this difficult time. So we focused on a broad range of issues, but common themes emerged. And two of those important themes relate here to social connection and purpose in healthy longevity, and those are ageism and technology. So looking briefly at the path ahead regarding ageism, we can support learning, working, volunteering, and multi-generational connections to the ends of creating purpose and social connection. But there's barriers we have to address in order to get there. So for example, US adults aged 50 to 80, 80% of them report experiencing ageism in their daily life. This can be a significant barrier to the purpose and connection that we're talking about. In workplaces, older workers encounter barriers to employment. When age is the only difference between job candidates, older workers have fewer follow-ups. 40% of companies believe an aging workforce can be a competitive disadvantage. So there's many ways that older workers potentially face ageism challenges. And there's also other important areas where ageism can impact health, such as ageism in healthcare. Plus, ageism itself negatively impacts health. So cross sectors, our experts urged that in the wake of the pandemic, we do more to tackle ageism, especially given the double burden many older adults of color face. And so then continuing to look at the path ahead for connection and longevity here today, we have an opportunity presented by technology, like smart devices, telehealth, social networks, that link family, friends, and caregivers, not only for health, but for social purposes. Again, there are barriers we need to address, but this year we've had, from our jobs to our homes, to our healthcare, we had rapid change in this area. And I know we have so much to learn from dialogue with Japan about this, who is really a world leader in technology in our health and connection in our lives, and thinking about how we can leverage technology to address important issues such as caring for an aging society. So technology, we know it offers great promise for everything from healthcare to social connection to work and educational opportunities as well, plus volunteering. But the barrier is that right now, we among older adults, we don't have high enough rates of usage, and it leaves many behind in a digital divide. Only 62% of US older adults 70 plus use a smartphone, according to recent AARP data, and only about a third of Medicare beneficiaries living below the poverty line, they actually report no internet usage. So we have some work to do in order to really help everyone participate in the promise that technology offers to support our efforts around purpose and connection to advance healthy longevity. Um, it's also important to remember in this area that high tech is not always a substitution for high touch, and we need to bear this in mind as we navigate our increasingly digital world post-pandemic. But these are just a few of the important ideas that surfaced that can shape the path ahead. I just want to end with a quick quote, which is, "It's not enough to have for a great nation merely to have added new years to life. Our objective must be also to add new life to those years themselves." And that's from President John F. Kennedy. And I'll just end with this. Here's the information about our center if you want to learn more. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. We really appreciate your comments and joining us from California. We have people from all around the world joining us, not only for our attendees, but also the speakers. So just quickly, let me introduce our second speaker. So we have Dr. Jean Axios, who serves, sorry, let me just grab, there we go, who's Senior Vice President of Global Thought Leadership at AARP. Jean, please feel free to begin.
Thank you so much, Paul, and thank you, Lauren, for an excellent presentation. I'm extremely honored to be part of this conversation today. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you are watching this. I get the great pleasure of actually presenting on behalf of AARP and our Global Thought Leadership team. And I thought what I would do is really have a conversation with you very briefly, and then clearly will be available for questions around living longer and healthier, and really looking at the commonalities between the US and Japan, and the opportunities to learn and really think about those innovations that can actually be brought to scale so everyone can have an opportunity to live a longer, healthier, more productive life. At AARP, we are an organization that was founded back in 1958. We have had an international arm since our beginning. We're an organization that has over 38 million members, and whether you're in Florida, or whether you're in California, or whether you are in the Virgin Islands, we have offices in every state. But most of our members, all of them, frankly, have one thing in common, and that is really to live a life of dignity, independence, and purpose as they age. So our role within the AARP International and Thought Leadership is really to drive the conversation and to position AARP as an organization that is driving and helping to elevate the issues of aging, not from the perspective of a decline, but really from the perspective of an opportunity. You heard from Lauren some of the population statistics in terms of global aging. We know that within the United States that about 10 to 12,000 people are turning 65 each and every day. And that is going to continue. And in just the next couple of years, the number of older people in the US will exceed the number of children for the first time in history. And in many countries, Japan being one, that's already the case. In addition to really driving the opportunities for us to reimagine a society in which we can leverage the contributions and the impact of the aging of the population, our responsibility and our charge is really to identify leading practices, policies, and innovations from around the world that is allowing people to live that longer, healthier, more productive, and more financially secure life, and help to bring those to scale. We also focus on partnerships and strategic partnerships with different organizations to really think about how can we foster exchanges and strategic alliances to elevate the issues of aging, and to really think about the opportunities to create an environment that would allow everyone the opportunity to age and age well. And then finally, we'll have this as part of the resources as our Aging Readiness and Competitive Initiative, which is a major resource that maps out many countries from around the world into how they responding to the aging of their population. So many years ago, we started a conversation at AARP with many people across the United States, and it was really, what would it look like, or what would it'd be if you were to be able to live to 100. And I'm just paraphrasing the question, but the idea was to get people to start thinking about the fact that people are in many cases living longer. And what would it look like if you were to live to 100? What would you want? What kind of system would you want? What kind of society would you want? And what we found was the fact that many people said that the goal is to live a longer, healthier, and more productive life. The goal is not just to live to 100, but to really live with dignity, to really live with opportunity, to really be able to contribute. And we know that in countries that are aging the best, a person, half of the 10-year-olds born today, living today, will live to be about 104. So we really need to think about the life stage of as we get older, that in many cases, people may have an additional 30, 40 years in terms of that longevity dividend. And what are they going to do with that? We also know that older adults who have a positive self-perception as they get older tend to live longer than those who do not. So to Lauren's point earlier, there is really an opportunity to think about how we view ourselves as we age in terms of how long we'll be actually able to live. So when we kind of think about some of the lessons from the blue zones, I just want to kind of share with you very quickly some of the things that we've found here, particularly in the United States. And this one is around social connectedness. I think one thing that the COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated is the fact that we are really interconnected human beings. That social isolation is costly, and frankly, it is deadly. We know that that with regards to social isolation, that the cost of social isolation, we did a report that found that it costs $6.7 billion to one of our major federal health programs every year because of social isolation. So there's a health aspect to this, a cost aspect, and that social isolation is equivalent to smoking about 15 cigarettes a day. And of course, we've seen that this pandemic has exacerbated loneliness and isolation, particularly among the younger adults, which is something we're gonna have to really kind of think about as we start to recover from this pandemic. One of the tools and resources that we create at AARP, and I would encourage you to take a look at this, is called Connect to Effect. It's an opportunity to just assess not just your loneliness and isolation, but also some of the tips and tools that you can actually utilize in order to get connected. The other thing that we created is something called AARP Community Connections. And this is an opportunity for neighbors to call neighbors, for volunteers to call homebound older adults just to check in and to give back. We heard about purpose. Within the US, we know that the 50+ population contributes roughly about $8.3 trillion in economic activity in 2018. And if the 50+ population was its own country, it would be the third largest country in the world. In addition to contributing economically to the economy, we also know that the 50+ population, the older adult population, actually contributes $745 billion in unpaid activity, which would be volunteering, charitable donations, caregiving responsibilities to the economy on a day-to-day basis. And because that we're seeing that longevity and life expectancy in many cases is increasing, that people either want to or need to continue working. So the idea of thinking about how work brings social and health benefits, and that many companies are actually managing 5 generations at the same time. In addition to purpose and social connection, physical activity is critically important. We know that 26% of older adults in the United States do not exercise, and that just 1 in 5 US adults get recommended amount of exercise. And clearly that in Japan, the Ministry of Health has been promoting incentives to exercise. And there's a range of other strategies, particularly in Japan, to really help advance healthy behaviors and healthy promotion. At AARP, I wanted to share with you that we created several years ago, about 3 years ago, what we refer to as FitLot, which is outdoor fitness parks in 53. We have 53 outdoor fitness parks currently across the US, and our goal is to have multiple in many communities. This gives people across all generations an opportunity to get together, and you see one of the pictures of one of the AARP Fitness lots, to get together with whether you're an older adult, a millennial or Gen Xer, an opportunity to engage in outdoor recreation, to exercise, to really work on your health and to exercise. In addition to that, we have over 400 communities that are quote unquote age friendly. And this is part of the World Health Organization network, really thinking about how are they creating the opportunity for the communities to be more livable. In addition, clearly there's opportunities for us to really think about not just the aging of the population, but the implications of that, both in terms of the context of long-term services and supports long-term care, and then also in the context of equity, given some of the issues that we've seen with regards to the pandemic. Clearly, as the population ages, more and more people want to receive services in their homes and communities. And I think there's opportunities for us to learn about some of the strategies that Japan has implemented, particularly to build out their long-term care infrastructure, and also to think about how we provide this care in a way that really recognizes the needs and preferences of not just those who need the care, but also support the millions of family caregivers who's providing that care. And then finally, what we've also noticed with regards to this pandemic is the fact that we really need to address the issues of equity. Address the issues of equity to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to really be able to live that longer, healthier, more productive life, and to be able to leverage the ecosystems, the communities as part of that process. So what would a vision for long-term service supports look like, particularly in the US context, that might also be helpful for you, for those who are watching this webinar today? Well, it really delves into 5 different dimensions. One is around affordability and access, meaning the fact that people should have the opportunity to have access to services, a range of services, and that there's some form of a safety net for those who can't afford it. That it's all about choice, that people should really have the choice of where they get the services, how they get the services, and who provide the services. And then the third is around quality of life and quality of care. As we've been talking about throughout our webinar today, really thinking about quality of life, particularly as one ages, is critically important. The other is around supporting family caregivers, particularly the millions who are providing the care on the front lines. And then finally, thinking about exactly how are our systems between long-term care and healthcare integrated to meet those needs. I know I went through that quickly, but I will be more than happy to answer any questions. And then finally, as we think about the opportunities to rebuild and reset and to reimagine, we really need to think about how we are creating and embedding equity as part of a strategy for ultimate growth. You heard from Lauren earlier about the impact of age discrimination and ageism. We did a study that found that age discrimination actually cost the United States $850 billion in lost revenue, lost productivity in 2018. So there's a huge cost to that. And then there's also the intersectionality of age and gender. And finally, here are some resources that really highlight some of the work that we're doing with regards to age, our international work, our journal, as I mentioned, our age readiness and competitiveness report, and of course, our Build Equity and Living to 100 information. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul or David.
Yes, David here. Thank you so much for that amazing presentation, Jean. We really appreciate it. And now we move from Jean in Washington, D.C. to Dr. Thomas Benson, who is in the Hudson River Valley of New York. And let me welcome Tom. You can turn your camera and microphone on to join us here. But Tom Benson is Executive Director of the International Association for Senior Debate. And he is also President Emeritus of Green Mountain College in Poultney, Vermont, among many, many, many other titles. And I've had the great pleasure of working with Tom in many capacities and delighted to welcome you here tonight. And Tom is doing a rare thing, presenting without PowerPoint. Yes. Turn it over to you, Tom.
This is an old-fashioned, just looking at you, but I have to say, thank you, David, very much. The presentations of both Jean and Lauren were wonderfully enriched by their visuals. And so at some point, I'm going to surrender to the future, which is here and be more oriented to PowerPoint. I looked at my appointment book for today and I saw Blue Zones Zoom, Blue Zone Zoom. And I thought to myself, what would I have made of that? What would I have made of Blue Zone Zoom? What would I have made of that 10, 15 years ago? What possible sense, if I could go back and look at what's going on, what would I have made of the notion of Blue Zone Zoom? And so history is moving at an ever quickening pace. These developments we heard about in terms of the demographics of the aging sector, planet-wise, are utterly gobsmacking, jaw-dropping, and they're accelerating. I just this last week picked up a copy of a new book by Andrew Steele entitled Ageless: The New Science of Getting Older Without Getting Old. Ageless, the new science of getting older without getting old. And Andrew Steele, with an E at the end of Steele, believes that within this century now, the 21st century, we will achieve negligible senescence, that wonderful set of syllables, negligible senescence. We will be able not simply to attack and conquer the diverse diseases that accompany aging, alas, arterial sclerosis and diabetes and Alzheimer's and the like, but we will be able, in fact, to arrest aging. And now, before you quickly poo-poo and dismiss that, just remember all those people floating around, those undaunted Wright brothers from Dayton, Ohio, when they talked about a heavier than air machine taking off in North Carolina. I would not bet against the thesis that we will, if not in this century, and I think it will be, then shortly after this century, in the 22nd century, we will achieve negligible senescence. Now, on top of that, I got another book, Restless Reader That I Am, this week. And both of these books are just out in the last several months. A World Without Work by Daniel Susskind, A World Without Work. And he's looking at, as we all are with some apprehension, the mounting toll in terms of employment of automation, the new technologies, artificial intelligence. What jobs will never be reducible to algorithms and to the capabilities of a greater than human level intelligence, superintelligence? A big debate going on about that among scientists and engineers in the area of artificial intelligence. But in many respects, it seems that both the indefinite extension of life with health and the automation of most of our areas of labor, it seems now that as if they're moving from the question of are they possible to the question, are they desirable? Should we take steps to prevent or moderate these breakaway developments in science and technology? Well, in traditional society, as we know, there were very, very few people in any society, in any community, who made it into what we now call old age, a sector of our society that is growing more rapidly than any other sector. People 65 years and older are proliferating, their ranks are filling at a rate much more substantial than those of young people, childhood, roughly birth to 18 or so, and then the middle years. It is, as it's sometimes called, a time of age quake, a time of a silver tsunami. This is an extraordinary development and a wonderful book that treats the relatively sudden emergence of this extended later life. Was written by a British social historian, Peter Laslett, and I highly recommend it. It's available from Harvard University Press in paperback. It's called A Fresh Map of Life, A Fresh Map of Life. Laslett is arguing that since the dawn of the 20th century, during the 20th century, humanity in the so-called developed countries, this is not, alas, a global phenomenon, but acquired 3 extra decades of life. Between 1900 and 2000, life expectancy increased to that extent. The consequence of that is that the old ways of dealing with advanced years no longer suffice. Even into the 20th century, people looked forward to the golden years as a maybe decade or so, maybe 15 years, in which they would pursue what I call the 4 R's in no special order: rest, reverie or reminiscence, and so on; relations, family, the grandchildren, and friends, the friends surviving, and recreation. Lots of golf, lots of bridge, lots of mahjong or whatever. Again, those considerations all depending upon wealth and opportunity. Many people fighting to stay fed and sheltered well into their later years didn't get the benefit or the opportunity for those R's, especially the R of recreation. So rest, recreation, relations, and reverie. Now, Peter Lazzett is making the point, and it's an obvious one. My background is in philosophy. At the drop of a hat, I'm inclined to turn to thoughts of Nietzsche and Hegel and to bore people out of my company. But the issue of meaning, what's it all about? Not just Alfie, but Alice and everybody. What is it all about? We're talking about living longer. We're talking about being more healthy, the blue zones indeed. But if there isn't meaning and value and depth in those extended years, what's the use of it? There's a wonderful essay that was written by a British philosopher now gone, Bernard Williams, and it's called The Macropolis Affair. In that essay, he talks about, he does a philosophical meditation, so to speak, on a play by Capek. The play involves a woman who finds the elixir of life. She consumes the elixir of life and she lives for 1 century, 2 centuries, and on her 300th birthday, she takes her life. She says, enough. His argument, Bernard Williams, the philosopher, is that there may be a limit within us, within our own personality structures, within our cultures, a limit to how long we can live with contentment, a sense of connection and meaning. Again, a rich area for philosophical discussion. But insofar as a workless world is perhaps on the horizon, insofar as negligible senescence is perhaps on the horizon, then we can look at the challenge we're facing and discussing now of our own limited 70, maybe we should say, lives as a kind of test case. How we respond to this challenge facing us now of extra decades in our lives without being employed, without work, how we address this challenge may be an advanced look, a preview of how humanity itself will deal with the prospect of living on with great lifespans without any gainful requirements for gainful employment. Very interesting questions that we have tied probably from the time of hunter-gathering societies. We've attached worth and we've attached meaning to work. So when people leave the workplace and retire, there's a sense in which their sense of worth and also their sense of meaning is gone, which isn't to say that for most people, their work was very meaningful, but at least it's something they did 5 days a week, so many weeks a year and so on. It gave them some sense of purpose. Where do you find purpose? Where do you find meaning in a life where you no longer are defined in terms of what you do and your schedule is filled in that way? So what we need to do is reimagine aging. We need to reimagine, in a still broader sense, the meaning of our lives in a world chock-a-block full of existential threats and risks. One other book I want to put in a plug for is just out again this year, The Precipice, as in edge of a cliff, Existential Risk and the Future of Humanity, written by Toby Ord of the Oxford University Future of Humanity Institute. Toby Ord, O-R-D, extraordinary, looking at runaway artificial intelligence, the obvious headlining crisis, climate challenge and crisis, climate change, looking also at future pandemics and widening gaps in terms of haves and have-nots and a whole range of other issues. We are living in a time of dramatic change. I've been plugging books and getting no, I'm not getting percentages on any of these books. I want to recommend another book written by a gentleman in his 100th year, published as a kind of celebration of his centenary birthday. And the author is the great British natural scientist, James Lovelock, father of the Gaia hypothesis. It's called Novacene, Novacene, Novacene. James Lovelock in that book argues that the Anthropocene, the period in which humans have in essence been shaping the fate of the planet, is going to come to an end in this century. So he hypothesizes, prophesizes. And he as a scientist is arguing we will be succeeded, anthropos, Homo sapien, by our own creations, i.e. hyper-intelligent entities. You might think that's really science fiction, Ray Kurzweil kind of thinking gone loony, but no one can doubt the bona fides of James Lovelock as a distinguished scientist. I recommend it highly. At age 100, that book was published by MIT Press approximately a year and a half ago. So it is a time of change and transition, and we're in quest not just of a fresh map of life that includes many decades after one leaves the workplace, but in a sense, the challenge facing us is one of coming to terms with our future as a species on this planet. Now, as we come together to reflect on these matters, the near-term matters that have been addressed by Lauren and Jean, and they must not be overlooked. Those are the immediate existential challenges pertaining to aging and health and the like. I think we have to understand how incredibly interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary these challenges are, taking in almost every one of the natural and social sciences, as well as the humanities and the arts. I think we also need to understand that this struggle to find meaning, purpose, and dignity in later life is a moral challenge. Ageism is not just bad manners. Ageism is in fact a moral injustice. It is wrong. It is also stupid in that eventually, if we're lucky enough, we're going to live long enough to be in that cohort that still is fighting for its place in the sun in many places. If you compound age, race, poverty, and as Jean, I think, mentioned, gender issues, you create just a disastrous compound of disadvantages. But age in itself, for too many, is a predicament of suffering and challenge. I've been thinking of Martin Luther King's famous statement, "Injustice anywhere threatens justice everywhere." So also with respect to ageism and victims of age discrimination. Now, another issue I want to make is, and it's been alluded to in the previous presentations, one of the paths forward is to think about intergenerational connections of projects, programs where the generations can come together and learn and share, the young people, the mid-career people, and the older people, not just one-dimensionally, but share in terms of giving and taking. And it turns out there's interesting gerontological research show that Lars Tornstam, the Swedish gerontologist, developed, now gone, but in a book called Gerotranscendence. He argues that late in life, in fact, people do develop or can develop peculiar strengths and powers that can make a difference in terms of their own personal growth. So the older generation not only contributing service and support to young people, but also looking within and developing their own potentials for further growth. There are limitless fields to till in the realm of the spirit, said Lysander, and so it is. Until we die, just as Mozart, alas, very prematurely, but on his deathbed, he is said to have said, "Mehr Licht," more light. He still wanted to compose until our last breaths, insofar as we're able, and many of us won't be. But insofar as we're able, mer lish, more opportunity to grow and discover and to relish this beautiful thing called human life. Thank you.
Wow, Tom, thank you very much for that stellar presentation. And now that we have gone from Lauren in California to Jean in Washington, D.C., and Tom in upstate New York in the Hudson River Valley, we have a chance to turn now to Okinawa, Japan. And it's a real pleasure for me to introduce Dr. Mitsuhiro Yanagida, who is a professor in the G0 cell unit at the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University, OIST. So with that, Tom, I'll ask you to turn your camera and sound off, and I'll turn it over to Yanagida Sensei, and I will be sharing his slides.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. People can see, yes, this is my slide, yes. So I'm a little bit more about real science, chemistry actually. So the title is Whole Blood Metabolomics. I come from OIST. Previously, I was professor in Kyoto University, stayed over there 40 years, and then come here now 10 years in Okinawa. So I'd like to talk about how we know about the human aging through metabolism in blood. Why I use the word whole? Whole means blood contains a large amount of red blood cells. Usually, these blood cells are discarded before doing experiments, but we found whole red blood cell is extremely precious information there for aging. Therefore, you use whole blood. Okay, next slide, David, please. Yes. So longevity in Japan, it is quite high. I think Hong Kong has the longest lifespan in the world. Japan may be second or third with Switzerland. And here, 80s, about 10 million Japanese live among 130 million. It's quite high. Particularly women are very high. 90s, not so. It's 130 million to only 2 million. So many people actually deceased, transition from 80 to 90. Furthermore, centenarian, over 100 years old, that's much, much rare. Japanese men previously smoked too much, so they died pretty quickly. Now these days, young Japanese men stop smoking, so maybe we have better men's record, but centenarian, only 80,000 people, and 88% of centenarian are female. So that's Japanese longevity right now. How to study longevity? Our approach is, just I mentioned to you, we work on age-linked biomolecules, but not protein, not DNA. We work on metabolites. That's quite small organic compounds. And we use these markers and found compounds decreased or increased in elderly over 65. And what kind of molecules there? One is typically antioxidation, that is anti-rusting. You know, the body will be rusted at age and then people die. Okay, so oxidation is actually the enemy of health. Radical scavenging, you understand, and muscle maintenance compounds, many of them quite important. Much part of our body is muscle, therefore muscle maintenance is extremely important. And then urine compounds, that is nitrogen containing compounds, homeostasis is utterly important. And you can see here, the frailty people increasing quite high. I have a collaborator in Kyoto University, Kondo Sensei and Kameda-san, and those people working hard for the identifying patients or subjects to volunteer for study. And then we get blood, and next, yes. Here, we use a machine called LCMS, liquid chromatic mass spectrometry, and it's pretty expensive, nearly $100 million machine, but very precise to tell us what kind of metabolites amount present in our blood. So that gives us very precious information about people's age. Next slide. Age markers. So here are young people and older people. We got the blood and compared them. So both are healthy, only simply old and young. Also, you work on the various disease, frailty. Frailty is the name of disease which we get weakened. Sarcopenia is a muscle is much weakened. And mild cognitive impairment is a sort of the brain function is no longer properly functioning. Alzheimer's is a very famous disease for impacting brain function, and some others such as diabetes, etc. And please, next slide. So we've got compounds which it shows a significant decrease in 9 compounds above, and then 5 compounds below is a decline. I'm sorry, this is upregulated, increase, upregulated in elderly. And they are above 9 is downregulates. And you can see that they're quite characteristic metabolism, but mainly, as I told you, antioxidation, oxidoreduction, or muscle maintenance, such as and also urea cycle, etc. And these are really the key compounds to sustain our youngish body after 65 years old. Next slide, please. Yes, this is a red blood cell. So this is a little bit quantitative data, but I just would like to explain to you to trust me, because we get blood and then get the metabolites and then about the proper number of subjects. And initially we work on those people's muscle strength or cognitive ability, etc. And these are shown here. Frailty often accompanied with cognitive decline, and TUG is a decline of muscle activity. Next part, this part, please. Next, could you go to the, yes, this one. This is another data, but this is basically how we get raw data. So these dots represent individuals. So if we measure either classified by clinical diagnosis, either frail, non-frail, or impaired cognitive activity, or etc., and then measures that by that expensive machine, we measure the abundance of compounds and then get the whole data. Could you go to the next data here? Yes, this shows this is metabolic abundance. And very nicely, we can see by using statistical method, principal component analysis. This blue dots represent individual and very nicely make one zone different from healthy control. And furthermore, non-frailty with hypomobility. That this means very slowly walk, or even their wheelchair person. And this one is a non-frailty with cognitive. So not weak body, but cognitive ability is much declined. So these people all grouped through the value of abundance of metabolites. So chemistry tells us the such human behavior, human aging. Here, please, this one. Yes. So I can see, but I think you can see. So actually, there is about 40, 30, 20, and 35 compounds. They're beautifully separated into different categories, either aging markers, cognitive markers, or frailty markers. That can be confirmed. So now we know chemistry and found this chemistry part is defective this part is okay, etc. So chemistry now tell you about your aging. Okay. Next one, please. Yes. So this is just how many compounds we are dealing with by machine. About 130 for each individual. We can measure your 130 compounds in brain, can precisely measure and can tell you. I'm not doctor, therefore I have no authority about that, but simply your compound is this and that. And for example, here you can see left top, L-theanine. This is cognitive compound, very mysterious, interesting, present in mushroom, but no, we can't make it. We simply eat. It's like a vitamin. And this is salt, rusted salt. So just to imitate. So okay, so next slide, please. Okay, so not just recording your abundance of compounds, but we like to cure. It's very ambitious. Cure frailty or cognitive thing by sort of introducing compounds I told you either declined in elderly people or either increased compounds are suspected to be toxic and toxic. Therefore, we must make antitoxic compounds to make normal. That's our idea. So as you can see, here's double arrows. Frailty people may become non-frailty, or non-frailty people become frailty by administering the compounds, which are, I just mentioned to you, by proteomics, metabolomics. Next slide, please. Next part here. So this is called a randomized control trial, the RCT is a common terminology, to do the drug screen, and placebo is a fake medicine, and treated one contains such as the compounds, L-theanine, and then we try to see if frailty person to become a non-frail person by examinations. Next part here, please. Yes, by this, we plan, this we are planning about 3-4 months of schedule and to see if to find any kind of improvement and then maybe cognitive impairment might be recovered. And for that, there is, next one, this final one here. Yes. So this is already one Japanese company trying to do. They try to sell Yamabushitake. It's one type of mushroom, and they contain a lot of L-theanine. And they published a paper about 10 years ago, and which seems to quite promising results. Cognitive impairment actually so significantly recovered. So this kind of work is anti-aging, to find out anything in anti-aging. But other more simplest method is actually fasting. There is a number of people who have a lot of faith fasting. Ancient time is Buddhist monk, Zen monk, or all kinds of Zen monk do often fasting to make better health and recover. Cannot use for coronavirus, but actually fasting is very good to reduce the lipid content. And then we did experiments. Can I get here? So actually, this is quite serious fasting, and therefore 57 hours is look like impossible. But the first author of this paper was very ambitious and enthusiastic. We got the beautiful data, but nobody can repeat that. But of course, this was under the doctor's inspection all the time. And then we can see this all many compounds increase after starting the fasting. And the metabolites increasing is actually the symbol of youngish compounds. Amazing. Many compounds actually, good compounds increase. So if I see this, I have some faith. If I have a bad health, I will start the fasting because in body, many good compounds converted from such as lipid make very good compounds actually. Can I see get one here? Yeah. Okay. So this is a summary. If you're interested in go to the actual literature, fasting is amazingly productive method, possibly if you use properly. Particularly activation of mitochondrial activity and a huge increase of antioxidants and in reducing the lipid and the number of pre-imaging and other organic compounds which might be very useful for youngish body. Okay, I think this is the end of my talk. I have a close collaborator in Kyoto University, Kameda-san, Masahiro Kameda, and Dr. Hiroshi Kondo, and my collaborator in OIST, Takayuki Teruya. Thank you very much for your listening.
Well, thank you so much, Yanagina Sensei, and thank you to all of our speakers. And I think Yanagina Sensei is still on the, he's pinned. I don't know if everyone can see me. Okay, well, I'll keep talking. So let's first, no, okay, great. I think now we're there. Okay, so a number of panel, and I'm just going to keep this to 2 questions. Try to keep this as quickly as we can because we won't have more time for audience questions. But a number of panelists discussed loneliness and social isolation. We've also seen a lot of this over the past year, given the COVID pandemic. So I was curious, why is it important to design a new social infrastructure to combat loneliness in older adults? And so actually, let's first go to Jean Axius. So again, why is it important to design a new social infrastructure to combat loneliness in older adults? I think you talked about this some in your presentation.
Well, Paul, I really appreciate that question. I think that what we've seen globally is the fact that loneliness and social isolation impacts our health, it impacts our mental health, it impacts our longevity. So as we think about opportunities to reimagine and rebuild, I think that it's important for us to think about what are the strategies, what are the opportunities to connect people together in a way that really improves their health, improves their mental well-being, and also reduces costs. I think that one of the things that we need to do and think about is the fact that there's direct and indirect costs. And what I tried to actually illustrate in the presentation is the fact that not only is that there a negative impact on your health and your ability to live longer because you're isolated and you're lonely, but it also costs our systems a significant amount of money, particularly in the US. $6.7 billion every year is a tremendous amount of money that can actually be used for other means. And that's a direct link to social isolation. So I do think that as we move forward and we reimagine, and I think one of the things that COVID-19 has demonstrated, because we've been quarantined in many regards, is the opportunity for human connection. And the fact that, frankly, we took several things for granted. We took going out to dinner with friends and family for granted. We took meeting, connecting with our family members and our loved ones for granted. And I think that if there's one thing that I personally have learned from COVID-19 is how important those connections are.
Great, thank you so much, Jean. I appreciate that. So if I could actually go now to Lauren with the same question, I'll share it again in case you need to remember. But again, so why is it important to design a new social infrastructure to combat loneliness in older adults?
So I think that Jean did a beautiful job of just giving us the why, right? The why is about our health, the why is about cost, the why is about our needs as people to connect and have purpose. And then I think that I want to focus a little bit on the how, right? And so we've talked about work and how important it is to figure out ways to have people have options for longer, potentially more flexible work lives and to be valued in the workplace and have reduced ageism. There's also a how about our communities themselves, right? As we talk about aging in place as a way to promote social connection, to enable people to stay in their communities. But we have a lot of progress to make before we can really realize that for more people. And some of that is about our infrastructure, right? Very few houses have universal design features. There are current barriers to long-term care being affordable and available to everybody that would like to age in place. And so there's some definite structural things around policy for that. And there's also communities themselves thinking about how they are built, from making sure that our road crossings enable people to have enough time that might move a little bit slower, and really thinking about some of the community design elements of what it takes to really integrate people into society even more as they age in their homes. And so I think that there's really important whys, and that we need to really we have a lot of work ahead of us on the hows. But the good news is that people are really studying it and working on it, and there's more awareness after this, because we've also deeply felt what it maybe feels like to be lonely or socially isolated in ways we haven't before, that maybe increased our empathy and hopefully our interest in pursuing those potential interventions that would make it better.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lauren. And so I did say we're going to have 2 total questions. I think we might actually have just one more, but I wanted to bring in Yanagita Sensei and President Benson. So first of all, Yanagita Sensei, since you are the scientist within, I guess we're all scientists of some way, whether it's a social scientist, but Yanagita Sensei, I actually wanted to ask about food, because we didn't really hear a lot of that within the presentations. So I'm curious what role food plays in healthy living and longevity. And perhaps you could even share some thoughts on Japanese food versus American food. So I gotta get a Sensei if you're there.
Sure, I heard about that. I'm not really the specialist in that kind of question, but I can tell we really need, in Japanese side, more meat for very elderly people. Actually, over 80 or over 75 years old people are recommended to eat a little bit more meat. But the young people may not overeat of meat. So that is one idea, and probably this is true, because the carbohydrates are basically made up of starch and etc. It contains a lot of nitrogen compounds, which makes body. And actually, old people do not feel so much to eat meat, but that's very good for brain function and muscles, etc. So for food, I would like to say we do not rely on what told by people, but maybe rely on real nutritional specialists to tell us what is missing. And that is probably what we need is a specialist work on elderly people's nutritional problem. I'm not so sure about to tell you, but that's it.
Great. Thank you so much, Yanagita Sensei. So for the last question about I guess within our moderated part of the discussion, President Benson, given that you are certainly our educational expert on the panel, how would you see educational institutions? Obviously, you were president of a smaller liberal arts college, from what I know. How do you see educational institutions as reimagining themselves for older adults and for active seniors?
Yes, well, education is the educational institutions, K through 12, as well as higher education, have a tremendous opportunity to make a difference here in adding to health and longevity, meaning and depth and happiness, contentment. It is tragic that as we have this kind of misalignment of lengthening life. That's a wonderful thing, healthier lengthening life, and the utter collapse of the liberal arts colleges, many of them, most of them, over the next 10, 15 years are probably going to be shuttered. And even within our more well-endowed, enduring institutions, the emphasis is on STEM, is on business and finance, and young people are, because it is a very expensive business acquiring a college or university education, are focusing their attention not on Dante and George Eliot and Thoreau and Emerson, who pick your Kunze and Lao Tzu. They're putting their attention on those vital courses in science, technology, engineering, economics, finance. So when they acquire those open spaces in later life, they're poorly provided with resources to navigate the spiritual challenges they'll be facing. So I think there's a great opportunity to start talking as early as elementary school education about planning for lifespan, seeing your life journey as a pilgrimage of sorts, and challenging young people to be thinking not just about what they're going to be when they grow up, but how they're going to be when they grow up.
Thank you so much, President Benson. And I'm sure that, we're already going over on time, which is fine. But we could have a day's worth of conversation about all of the topics from our speakers. But now I'd like to pass it back to David, who will guide our discussion from audience questions.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I'm going to invite all of our panelists to turn their cameras on and join us for this, what'll be a bit of a rapid fire session here. We will extend the time a little bit because we have so many great questions. But let me turn first maybe to you, Lauren, and then quickly to you, Jean, for this first question from an audience member, which, Jean, I think you addressed a little bit, but Lauren, I'm going to turn it to you first, which is how does gender play into aging, living longer and healthier in blue zones and everywhere? And if you could unmute yourself. Yeah, thank you.
That's a broad question. It's really important because we know that overall, in general, women live longer, and women often also have caregiving roles on their way to living longer. And it's really important. We've talked a lot about the health side of things, but it's really important that we also think about the financial part of things, because there's a big financial feedback loop between our health and our financial well-being. And so we know that women are living longer. We can talk for a very, very, very long time about how we help people save longer for retirement. But women, just if you'll trust me on paraphrasing the data there, have disparities when it comes to being able to save and being able to participate not only in the workplace for a variety of reasons, but also in savings vehicles through the workplace, and are more often taking part in uncompensated work through caregiving. So you have all of these potential inputs that impact women's ability to provide for their financial wellness, and that we really need to have some intervention and put a lot of thought into that as a whole, as we look at some of the things that we talked about earlier about caregiving and long-term care, and making sure that as people age and have significant health costs related to it, we hope that we're going to have healthier aging as we do more of this. But we also know that there are really significant health costs with, for example, the average couple in retirement having $250,000 around there in out-of-pocket healthcare costs, aside from Medicare, and figuring out how we can do more to address that too, and ensure that our healthy years are also ones that we can live in dignity.
Thank you, Lauren. Pass it to you. Yep.
Thank you, David. I'll just build off of that. I do think that as we have this conversation, it's going to be important, particularly as we think about the issues around equity, to think about the intersectionality of some of these issues. And I'll give you some real concrete examples of how age and gender in particular intersect, and what does that actually mean with regards to women's ability to not just live longer, because on average they do, but the quality of life of what that might look like, particularly if you're a woman who's aging. So the report that I mentioned around the cost of age discrimination that age discrimination cost the US $850 billion. So that means that if we did not have any form of ageism, particularly in the workplace, our economy within the US context would be much better off, much stronger, right? 33% of that is due to the fact that women were forced out of the labor force. If you look at the context of caregiving, we just released a report 2 weeks ago that looked at, what could we potentially be doing to support working family caregivers? In the United States, there's over 48 million family caregivers who are caring for someone over the age of 18. 60% of those family caregivers are women. And 60% of all family caregivers are working. So that means that they're juggling their work responsibilities, and many might be on the call today, juggling their work responsibilities, coupled with giving injections, doing tube feedings, wound care, and the like, and having to make very hard decisions. Those decisions comes in many forms, whether it's declining a promotion, having to come into work late or leave early, having to go from full-time to part-time, or in some cases, leaving the workforce altogether. And as you can imagine, that has a direct impact on their financial security. And when we looked at the data, women were 3 times more likely than men to be disproportionately impacted as a result of their caregiving responsibilities. So as we have this conversation, particularly around the intersectionality of age and gender, I just wanted to use those as 2 examples of how this actually comes, how this gets translated. So in many cases, women are living longer, but what is that quality of life? What is the ability to have that financial security that's needed is going to be critically important. So some of the solutions come into respite care, tax credits, paid family leave, really thinking about what are the opportunities that would allow caregivers the opportunity to continue to work while providing that type of care. So thinking about the structure of our long-term care system is critically important. So I share this because I think that there's a lot of examples of things that is happening in Japan and other countries where we can actually learn from. And as an organization, what we're trying to do is really elevate some of these innovations, because at the end of the day, it's about human lives. It's about the experiences of people as they age.
Well, as one of our audience members said, this can be the topic of an entire webinar or symposium or year-long or multi-year-long study, but thank you so much for that. Let me turn to a scientific question for a moment to Professor Yanagida. And again, everyone can keep their camera on, and Professor Yanagida, if you want to turn your camera on, and Tom as well, we'd welcome that. But there's a question here, particularly for you, Yanagida Sensei, which is in the fasting experiment, was there a limit on the amount of water?
Water can drink anytime, any amount. Green tea is okay. So most people drink as much as they want, just to water. Even maybe tea is fine. So that's quite healthy, at least about water.
So,
Yes.
so now we've learned a bit of a secret on how to stay alive longer. And
Yes.
let me turn to a next question. I'll turn to you, Tom, which is one that has to do really with culture and religion. And I'm just going to read the question, which is, are we aware of any specific lifestyle, cultural, or religious practices that account for the blue zones, especially in Japan, like Eastern medicine or Eastern philosophy? But I guess maybe I could even just broaden that out a little bit for you, Tom. And I know this could be an hour-long answer, but I'll just ask you to try to cover it concisely. How does religion, culture, cultural practice play into some of these issues of longevity and kind of a healthy and meaningful long life? And I'll ask you to unmute yourself.
The question to whom?
To Tom. And Tom, if you would unmute yourself, that would be great.
If I can say a little bit.
Yeah, please.
I think in Japan, still Eastern medicine, Chinese medicine has a huge influence, still. I mean, if you go to any drug stores, one large corner is selling all kinds of Chinese medicine, and the people know better now. They have good guidance, and then they take like as a tea or every day is a little bit of additional. So it's not like Western medicine, but it's a similar effect. And that is, how you say, still people have rely on ancient wisdom, and that's quite good, in my view.
But Tom, before you answer, just a follow up for Yanagita Sensei. The medicines or the herbs that you're speaking about, which you can find in Japan and other places in Asia. In Japan, are there scientific studies going on the efficacy of these kinds of herbs? Is that something that is becoming more popular to study?
Yeah. I mean, many university pharmaceutical department have at least one laboratory working on Oriental medicine. And also one university college is entirely working on ancient medicine, kind of we call kampoyaku, Chinese medicine. So to look for new drug.
Right. Thank you so much. That's very interesting. And Tom, I'll turn to you for a moment.
Yeah, I want to recommend an article just in leading into this very briefly. In Foreign Affairs, the issue for September and October last fall talks about the global eclipse of religion. And again, another, just as the decline of the liberal arts in our educational system is lamentable given the need for the kind of resources liberal arts education brings, so also the decline, dramatically well-studied decline of the traditional religious paths and institutions is coming at a time when people more than ever need resources for meaning and the kind of community infrastructure and support religious institutions have provided. Now, they're still vital religious communities, no doubt about it, but population and number wise, it's a very, very kind of disturbing trend. In the great religious traditions, to your question, David, in the great religious traditions, there is more perhaps than anything else an emphasis on wonder, and in relationship to wonder, astonishment that we find ourselves here in this little ball of dirt in the universe, the starry heavens above. That wonder also goes with a sense of humility. And with those two things, wonder and humility, a sense of calm, a sense of perspective, a sense of who we really are. Now, couple that with many of the great traditions, East and West, North and South, putting an emphasis on meditation or contemplation. No doubt about the power of meditation in promoting health and well-being and contentment and so on. And that's another vital part, it seems to me, of the equation. Now, a little odd fact about a blue zone, which is maybe the most peculiar one on the map that's been defined for this session, the one in Loma Linda, California, the Seventh-day Adventist community in California. How is it that that's a blue zone? Well, Ruth White was the kind of Mary Baker Eddy of Seventh-day Adventism, just as Mary Baker Eddy was the mother of Christian Science, a whole other story. Quite independently, Ruth White developed this community of beliefs and tradition, Seventh-day Adventism. Why are Seventh-day Adventists radically committed, totally committed to vegetarianism, as well as to promoting first-class medical institutions, as you find in Loma Linda? And the answer is, Ruth White said, the body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, she said, reading her Christian scripture. And anything we do that is incompatible with the physical health, that involves nutrition, it involves alcohol, smoking, other things, all demon rum, whatever. This is 19th century Ruth White. Anything like that must be eschewed, must be rejected. So the Seventh-day Adventists enjoy remarkable levels of health vis-a-vis other population cohorts. In part, it owes to their vegetarianism, their absolute rejection of smoking, of drinking in excess or at all, and on exercise and other physical fitness. So it's a religious community, a small one, that has placed really science-based health practices at the center of their religious tradition. I guess one could say, God bless them, all those healthy Seventh-day Adventists.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. We have gone far over time and we could clearly go on forever, but what I'd like to do to wrap up before I make some very brief final remarks and turn it to Paul for closing remarks is first of all, say thank you to all of you. This has been exceptional. And I want to thank the audience for joining us, but I want to give each of you a chance to make a final remark. Some statement that you would like the audience to leave with, and also if you don't have something in mind, let me give you one question that an audience member has, which really is the relationship between purpose and a longer life. And I wonder if you might have some kind of message in regard to the way in which purpose and meaning ties into a happy and longer life. So I'll call on each of you, and I'll turn to you, Jean, first, if I could.
That is a very powerful question, David. What I would say is this: is the fact that we all have an opportunity to define purpose and meaning in a way that really advances our own longevity, and that as we're going through this pandemic, I think many of us have spent time reflecting on what are our priorities, what brings us joy, what brings us meaning. And I think those conversations that you've had with yourself or are having with yourself are critically important to your own longevity and life expectancy. So as we continue to not just weather this pandemic, but also come to a much better and stronger part as part of the recovery, that we all have an opportunity to lead and to live a life of purpose and meaning as we define it. And I think the goal is to really find moments of joy and things that bring you a sense of happiness throughout the day. And it's doing those steps each and every day. I learned a while ago that it's always good to take 2 steps forward. And just taking those steps forward will hopefully enrich your life, bring more meaning to your life, and by its very nature, extend your life.
Thank you, Jean. I'll turn to you next, Mitsuhiro Yanagida-san.
Well, if you keep healthy activity, people would like to live eternally, but that is not statistically valid. Most people die before 100 years old, and even 90 years, very far away for most of people. So I think we should accept the truth about our body and about health. But at the same time, we should become very wise to collect information about health. And also we need a courage to conduct our healthy life. That requires a lot of courage to not to do something bad, should do only good things. Therefore, it's kind of internal battle about your life expectancy. Therefore, I would like to say, talking about religion, scientists usually do not trust so much religion, but actually in Japan, shrine is one of the great compromise of religion. And same as true for health and shrine are very tightly combined. That always stay in forest and healthy forest life. So something like that, we must think about on life with certain kind of freedom for life, of course. You know, some people are not always lucky, not always unlucky. So in that sense, I think we should accept the destiny, what happened to us. But at the same time, we should trust our health and strength, and therefore we can live at least 80s and hopefully 90s. That is my current message about life expectancy. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yanagida and Lauren.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be a part of the conversation here today. And these have been some incredibly poetic ending notes, and I'll do my best, but I'll just note that older adults are our only increasing natural resource, that we need to keep that in mind as we think about healthy longevity. Healthy longevity isn't just something that impacts the health of individuals or communities, it also impacts the health of our society at large, and our well-being is, for around older adults, it really is an indicator of how we are doing as a society. And for all these reasons we've talked about around the great costs of ageism, the great costs of potentially caregiving, and the toll of chronic disease, I think we know that doing well for individuals in terms of healthy longevity will also reap benefits for society as a whole. And so those are really important, reasons to keep this top of mind and to care about purpose and connection in the sphere of all the great, as we've been talking about, day-to-day challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. And now, Tom, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, I heard the other day an old standard of Steve Earle, the bluegrass folk musician. I'm just a pilgrim on this road, boys. And thinking of tonight's session, I think of Basho and the narrow road to the deep north. And I think of Whitman and his song of the open road. There are bitter passageways along the trail, along the road. There are setbacks, and there are absolutely incomparable joys. I give you my hand, says Whitman. We must join hands across cultures, across generations, in facing these challenges, utterly unprecedented, that humanity faces in the balance of this century, if we are to sustain Homo sapien as a viable living organism on the face of the earth. We must work together. We're all pilgrims, but let's join hands and travel together with a sense of our sacred purpose.
Well, Tom, thank you for that. And tonight we traveled together, I think, in a very interesting way. We had 4 amazing panelists from different fields and kind of lenses looking at this issue. And you all joined hands in a beautiful way to give a stunning presentation. So I really want to thank all of you for this, and for sticking with us a little bit longer than expected, and also for the audience that's still with us now. And before I turn it over to you, Paul, for final remarks, I'll just simply say thank you on behalf of the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology and the OIST Foundation. We really appreciate having a chance to partner with Paul and the Japan American Society of Dallas-Fort Worth on this. And if you turn to our website, which is oistfoundation.org, oistfoundation.org, or the OIST website, oist.jp, you can learn about some of our upcoming events. We do have a number of events coming up. And the most important one, which I'll just mention here, and my colleague will put a link in chat, is on May 18th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. OIST and the OIST Foundation will be launching something called the Rita Caldwell Impact Fund for Women in Science. And we'll be having a webinar with 6 very distinguished female scientists from the US and Japan. And of course, Rita Caldwell herself, who was the first woman to direct the National Science Foundation, will be with us. So with that, I'll thank you all again and turn it over to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, David. And again, on behalf of the Japan American Society of Dallas-Fort Worth, we really appreciate the partnership with OIST and the OIST Foundation, and we thank all the speakers for their expertise. So I will be quick here. I know we're getting kind of late. It's, for those of you on the East Coast, it's 8:30. So just give me one moment. I'm going to share the screen. Okay, so wanted to mention we have a program actually with a nice New York connection as well. Joan Mervis, who is an art dealer and she works a lot in Japanese ceramics. She'll be joining us for a conversation next week. This is Tuesday, April 20th in the United States, and it is April 21st in Japan, although it is quite early in the morning in Japan. But this will be a program in partnership with the Crow Museum of Asian Art of the University of Texas at Dallas. And this will focus on an exhibition called Born in Fire, which is currently on display at the Crow Museum in Dallas. So again, that'll be a conversation with ceramic artists. Next, well, actually, before I mention that, we also, for those of you in the Dallas area, you might know the Plano Asia Fest. That is going to be an online event this year, and we're going to have a small submission. We'll be releasing more information through our website and through our newsletter, but that will be Saturday, May 8th for everyone in the United States. And then we're also finalizing details of a program in diversity and inclusion that will actually be in Japanese. It will be fully in Japanese. It will be on May 12th in the US. So please check our website, jasdfw.org, for more information. Lastly, I guess just two events here. We will have our annual meeting and member social on Wednesday, May 19th for the United States. We will have a celebration of the past year of what we've been able to accomplish. We will have a shamisen performance from Japan, and we will also premiere a brand new video that we've made about the organization. And the last thing, now this is actually an in-person event, so you have to be in the Dallas area to come and partake in this. But we will have our annual Sun and Star Golf Classic. We did not have it in 2020 because of the pandemic. So this is the first one that we have done since 2019. And there's more information on our website as well. So this will be at the beautiful Cowboys Golf Club in Grapevine. So for those of you in the Dallas area, if you want to participate in this event, just go to our website, jasdfw.org. Thank you so much. And I believe that, sorry, let me stop sharing. Okay, great. So that actually concludes our program. So I guess good evening for everyone in the United States and good morning. Have a great rest of the day for you in Japan. There is a survey that will pop up in your browser window. So please fill that out. That will help us gather more information and continue to improve. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day or great rest of the evening. Thank you.